Assessors play an important role in assessing applications and determining whether an applicant has the competencies and work experience required for certification. In this video, you'll learn the steps for assessing an application. You'll also learn the key things to consider as you assess an application. Before we talk about the steps for assessing an application, it's important for you to know what happens before you receive the request to assess. First, all new applicants begin the process either from the national website, engineeringtechnologycanada.ca, or directly from the website of the Provincial Association. Applicants that use the national website are able to determine their eligibility by determining if they match the trade, technician, technologist, or engineer profiles. Applicants will also select the registration pathway that best fits their circumstances. The online application system has a validation feature that checks that all of the required information has been entered before the application can be submitted. When applications are submitted, registration staff review each application and enter notes for assessors to review. They also choose 2 assessors and send them each an email inviting them to assess an application. The name of the applicant and other important information is included in the email. Once you receive the email, you'll need to confirm that you're willing and available to complete the assessment. This will include completing an electronic declaration in the Technology Registrations Canada system to confirm there is no conflict of interest if you assess the application. An example of a conflict of interest would be if you're the applicant's employer or a relative. The registration coordinator will send you an email requesting you to assess an application. You'll need to open and log on to the TRC dashboard and then select the applicant to be assessed. An accompanying video describes how to navigate and use the TRC online software when assessing an applicant. The first thing to do with an application is to review the notes provided by staff. These are under the Review tab. Next, click on the Personal tab to review the applicant's personal background, including the certification requested by the applicant. This could be Technologist, ASCT, Certified Technician, CTEC, or Registered Technical Specialist, RTS. Next, you'll need to look at the Education tab to figure out what international or domestic programs an applicant has completed and to determine which pathway the applicant has taken to complete the application. There are 4 pathways: graduate of an approved Canadian post-secondary education program, graduate of a recognized international post-secondary education program, Canadian Armed Forces personnel, reservist, or veteran, applicants with at least 5 years technical work experience and non-formal learning. Knowing which pathway an applicant has taken is important because these pathways direct applicants to complete different sections of the online application. Graduates of approved Canadian post-secondary education programs don't complete the general competencies for ASCT or CTEC. Military applicants complete an equivalency tool that converts Canadian Armed Forces occupations and experience to registration standards for selected ASCT and CTEC disciplines. Applicants that don't qualify for pathways 1, 2, or 3 are required to follow pathway 4, which is essentially a prior learning assessment and recognition process. The next thing you'll need to do is look at the Employment tab to review the applicant's work experience to find out how many years of work experience they have, the type of company or business they have worked in, and their job descriptions and titles. Current or recent job descriptions and job titles are the most important for you to look at because they will help you determine if the duties and tasks described in the job description match the profile of a technician or a technologist. Profiles are also known as levels of work experience. These descriptions are in a separate rubric describing types of work experience from level 1, trade, to level 6, engineer. Next, you need to select the Technical References tab, which includes referee contact information, professional designation, title, and relationship to the applicant. It's important to check if any of the referees have declined the request to complete a reference. If they have, this may be a bad sign because the relationship between the referee and the applicant is really important. As you review the reference information, you'll want to make sure that there aren't any family members listed as referees. You'll also want to check that there aren't any other relationships that could be perceived as a conflict of interest or bias, where the referee might provide a really positive or a really negative reference. The next step is to review the work experience level summary roll-up table that will be added to the revised TRC website later this year. The summary table displays the name of the referee, the number of months the referee has known the applicant, and the referee's determination of the number of months the applicant has worked at the various levels of work experience. Next, you'll view the Competencies tab to review the applicant's discipline-specific competencies. You'll need to decide if most of the indicators for the competencies have been achieved and are included in the description of the work experience. You'll also need to decide if the 2 mandatory discipline-specific competencies have been achieved. A rubric listing the mandatory competencies for each discipline is being developed. Next, you'll determine if the 3 optional discipline-specific competencies have been achieved. You'll also need to decide if the applicant's work experience, validated by a minimum of 3 referees, supports the claimed competencies for the discipline and requested certification level. This can be challenging to decide, but one way to think about it is to look at the total number of referees compared to the number of referees that are supporting the applicant's claimed competencies. For example, if there were 4 referees and only 2 of them supported the applicant's claimed competencies, this would be worrying. If you decide that a competency has not been achieved, you'll need to enter an explanation into the system. Your explanation should be specific enough for registration staff and the applicant to understand what the deficiencies are and what is needed to fill the gap. Specific explanations are also required for any decision that denies the applicant's claimed competencies, work experience, or overall application for registration. The last step is to decide whether or not an applicant has satisfied the certification requirements. As you make this important decision, think about whether or not the applicant has applied as a technologist, but is actually only qualified to be a technician. One of the ways to think about the difference between a technologist and a technician is to think of a technologist as someone who regularly creates documentation, and a technician as someone who takes direction from documentation. If you decide that the applicant has satisfied the certification requirements, you'll select Yes, which means that your recommendation to the Credentials Committee is approval of certification. If you select No, your recommendation to the Credentials Committee is to deny certification. You'll need to click on the Review tab to enter your recommendation and any other comments. The final step is to click Submit, and then you're done. Your recommendation and the recommendation of the other independent assessor will be reviewed by the registrar or designate. If the 2 assessments align, the application will be submitted to the Credentials Committee. If the 2 assessments do not align, further review will be necessary. Your role as an independent assessor plays an important part in supporting applicants to achieve certification and to find meaningful employment as technicians, technologists, or technical specialists. If you have any questions or require additional information, please contact the registration coordinator. Thank you for your service.